my name's Dr. Katie Strudwick and I'm currently the Dean of Lincoln Academy of Learning and Teaching. This is the first part to my presentation for the Future of Blended Learning conference, which is going to be addressing some of the lessons I've learned and some of my experiences in facilitating and developing student engagement initiatives, both within and outside of the curriculum. So what I've done is I've got a PowerPoint presentation that I'd like to talk you through, which is the precursor to the session we're going to have at the conference. I want to talk upon some of my observations of developing some of these schemes and initiatives, and equally to work through how we can learn from each other about our experiences. So I look forward to talking to you about it over the next 20 minutes or so. So what I'm going to be doing is reflecting upon, as it says there, some of the lessons that I've learned and how I've progressed with engaging with student involvement in both the curriculum and also in partnerships. I think really for me, my practice that I've undertaken institutionally at the University of Lincoln has really sought to engage students in projects within the discipline of criminology, which is within the School of Social and Political Sciences. I've done this over the last 15, 20 years, and my work has primarily been focused upon embedding these two models through focusing on student choice, collaboration, partnerships, and how students can engage with employability. So the presentation of my work for the Future of Blended Learning conference will be demonstrating how I've evaluated these and, as I said, some of the lessons that I've learned. There are obviously a number of models that can be used for your practice when you're developing student engagement initiatives. These two have been the ones that have really impacted upon my practice. So as you can see there on the right, Student as Producer, which was the initiative developed by Professor Mike Neary at the University of Lincoln, and was kind of set about from 2010 to 2014 for this project that is represented in the document here. However, it did become an institutional strategy for the University of Lincoln up until the present day. And so what this looked at was to look at teaching and learning, address that gap between teaching and research, and really bring together students and academics in practice. So the project was to develop and re-engineer effectively the relationship between research and teaching. So really the student as producers approach was one that really did kind of help me in facilitating some of my work, but equally there were principles in the other one, which is Mick Healy's engagement through partnership, or I'm going to say students as partners, that model, which again kind of set out some of the parameters for what I wanted to include in my work and in my practice, engaging students as partners and producers of knowledge in co-designing, co-developing, co-researching with academics in their practice. So to both of these modules, engagement is all about that active collaboration between students and academics, and this is really something that I feel over my work I've developed and embraced in a number of different ways. So I'm going to talk you through how I've done that, trying to kind of combine everything in my practice from the last 10, 15 years or so into a 20-minute presentation. But hopefully I'm going to be able to do that, which will lead to some really great dialogue we can have in the session at the conference. So just to summarise, these two teaching learning models, student as producer and students as partners, have really influenced my work. Now, just to focus on student as producer for a bit longer, what this model has is 8 key principles as outlined on the slide there. The plan is that this conceptual model does embrace student engagement alongside academics in teaching and learning and research it's got a working definition of research engaged teaching and learning, which was being addressed through some of these principles here. They basically shape the learning experience. So you've got discovery, which was looking at how teaching could be characterised much more by problem-based learning or inquiry-based learning. You have technology and teaching, which looked at the relationship between academics and students. You have space and spatiality, which really addressed how spaces can be used within teaching. You then had assessment, which looked more specifically at research engaged teaching practice and approaches that could be used. And then research and evaluation, looking again at research engaged teaching and learning approaches, and student voice, which was one of the principles that I feel is really, really important, because this is all about promoting engagement through student voice and addressing their responsibility and their role as students for that learning and their learning journey. You then have support for research-based teaching through expert engagement with information resources, again engaging professional services such as the library in these projects. And finally, the 8th principle is creating the future, which is looking more specifically at employability and postgraduate study. I feel my work over the last, say, 10, 15 years has really embraced some of these opportunities which have been developed through these 8 principles. My work's enabled students to shape their learning, to engage in a participatory and a kind of collaborative way. So just with regards to some of these, discovery, I very much focused my student engagement initiatives on employability. I utilised assessment. I applied research and evaluations with research engaged teaching, again focusing mainly on employability. And in all of my work, I promoted student voice with learning and providing support for work embracing transferable skills for students and development of graduate attributes. So my work really did follow these 8 principles and equally kind of went beyond them as well, but they were a very good parameter by which to start to think about how we can engage students in our teaching and learning and in those projects beyond the curricula too. Student as partners, it has been influential as well, as I mentioned earlier. This is because I work through the model that Mick Healy presents here in his work, where it's all about partnerships and the development of work that can be presented between academics and students in curriculum design, but equally in assessment and in scholarship as well. And what is interesting is how my practice was influenced by this, because you can see that outside of the model there is the student engagement, which is really explaining where Mick Healy comes across with regards to seeing how students as partners develops. And I'm going to quote here, he said that the process of engagement is not a product, it's a way of doing things rather than an outcome in itself. And that very much is how I kind of viewed my practice, by influencing student engagement both within and outside of the curricula. My contributions value the role that student engagement has within the wider student community. It places students in the research process and also as part of the curriculum design by identifying some of the values that Mick Healy has shown here. Partnership values, the potential to optimise student learning has been presented and responded to in my work. And so these principles have shown that there are real kind of beneficiaries as to how these 2 models can help in your planning and your development. So, just to move on to the next slide, What this shows is how I've reflected on these models and equally student engagement conceptually in my practice over the last 10-15 years. You can see there that I've identified some key connections or commonalities, if you like, between the three models there, such as the importance of collaborative working, engagement, co-learning, participation from both, the role that students have in their learning experiences, and what the student voice and those student experiences can offer us as academics when we work with them. And so I've just highlighted and summarised some of the key literature which may be of use to you as well in your development of student engagement kind of practice and developments that you may be thinking about or in the initial stages. Some of these, such as Crawford et al. Under the Student as Partners, again is really interesting to look at because it's all about how we engage students and we foster students as co-partners in the learning process, whereas Student as Producer, as explained there, has been framed around those 8 principles I've just gone through. Student engagement I'll be talking about a bit later on, and you can see there I've added some key projects on student engagement that really influence my practice, but there's obviously many others that you can work through. I would like to flag up the HEA framework for student engagement through partnerships. That's an excellent source to actually help with your kind of developmental processes and how you're starting to think about your initiatives and what they may look like. So that's just showing you how I reflected on some of those models and how conceptually I brought them together in my work. So I would just want to go through some examples of my practice. I'm not going to talk about all of these in great detail. I would be here for a long time if I did, but I just want to flag some up. So really my work started with developing Student as Producer and Student as Partners with CSAP projects, which was the Centre for Academic Partners, and equally it was influenced by HEA projects as well. And so what I wanted to look at was how we embed employability in the curriculum, and also how we kind of look at the expectations that both parents and students may have. This was at a time when students had just started to be charged fees for learning, and so it was really a timely opportunity to start to get a better understanding of where both parents and students feel about the many changes within the marketisation of higher education. So what I wanted to do was to look at these projects and develop the embedding of employability within the curriculum, which is what Criminology in the Professions did. It led to a module that is still running now as a core module on the Criminology programme at the University of Lincoln. It embraces partnership. It's taught in collaboration with the Careers Service at the university. We have practitioners coming in. It's very workshop based, with alumni evenings and career road shows, really giving students the opportunity to develop their skills and their transferable skills, so they understand where they can and where they could go in terms of graduation and career aspirations. It's about acting as to me, an employability framework by which my work has supported and enhanced student engagement with employability. The employability skills in social sciences again kind of addressed some of the expectations and fed from some of the work that I'd done with Criminology in the Professions. A lot of these projects were kind of follow-on projects as well, such as Student Reflections of SIP 1 year on, whereby funding was gained using students as co-researchers to really evaluate the impact that the Criminology in the Professions module and that work had actually had on their learning. Key to this was I took the opportunity with that particular project, Student Reflections of SIP, to get internal funding from the university, and definitely to involve students as co-researchers in the research team They did world cafes, they did structured surveys, and they found out from other students about the impact it would have. I then did other projects with internal funding, such as the impact of student mentoring. This was interesting, the Embedding OER project, which again kind of worked on through money from HEA Change Academy. I tried to look at how I've shown that student as producer as a model was illustrated in teaching and learning practice, so through developing OERs, or open educational resources. These resources were provided under an open license and are therefore developing technology and my understandings of student as producer as an enabler for others to work from. Some of these, again, were projects that all of them involved students as part of the research team. I'll be talking about some of them a bit later on. But I just want to, before I go on to the next slide, just talk about the crime prevention ones. These were small-scale projects whereby they were undertaken in partnership with Crime Stoppers and worked with students as researchers to see what the level of awareness was about crime prevention strategies at the university. It had a number of outcomes, which then led to a follow-up project, you can see here a year later, where we really did start to build and expand the level of student knowledge, working with professional services, working with Crime Stoppers, making sure that there were podcasts and there were outcomes and outputs which were included externally on the Crime Stoppers website, and equally with academic conference papers. So a lot of these projects, in fact, most of them have been delivered at various conferences over the course of these 10 years or so. All the time I try to get students that have worked with me as researchers to actually deliver those at conferences as well. And equally, where possible, if they have been written up as academic journal articles, to be part of that as well as co-authors. And so it's about involving students as co-researchers and partners in the initial processes of developing the module, in the evaluation, and equally in the dissemination, which I think is really, really important. It's kind of a longitudinal process by which students have been involved both externally and internally to really actually develop some of these opportunities to get involved in research in practice with academics. So just to kind of talk through one other research article that I wanted to reflect on. It's because I feel that this particular one, which is it's a paper which is understanding the gap to participate or not, and it's imperative to what I'm talking about today, because this project really wanted to evaluate student engagement and active participation, and to look at the broader opportunities which were available for them at the University of Lincoln during about 2016. It was around that time, January to July 2016. Again, I gained internal funding to develop this, whereby I worked with 4 students, and they were seen as students as facilitators. They were both integral to being part of the research team. And interestingly, the research was obviously being conducted with students as participants. So I wanted students to be engaged at all levels, really, both as co-researchers or facilitators, as I called them, and equally as part of the evaluation process. What this particular project did is it really made those connections between the models and between how student engagement can be developed as part of the process, but it's also influenced by student as producer and student as partners models. As I said, it represented a development, a kind of a shift in how and where students can be part of a research project, and how they're not seen in their teaching and learning in a passive way. As I've said there, they're not seen as passive recipients of teaching. But in my work and practice with students, such as with this research project, they're seen as active contributors. They're seen as co-collaborators with all of the learning process, whereby they become these contributors to actively support their role in teaching and learning and what they've got to offer the process on a more long-term basis. I think with this particular project, it was really important because it was presented at the RAISE conference with a team of students that worked with us as facilitators. They really led that, and then they also led the development of an academic journal article on this as well. And so it's about getting students involved through student engagement at all levels, which I think is really, really important. I'm going to talk now about how I've faced some of the challenges that have arisen and equally some of the kind of key lessons learned. But I really want to talk about this when we have the opportunity at the conference too. There's been some similarities in terms of gaining the required funding to develop student engagement projects. Some of this has been done through EUROS, which is the Undergraduate Research Opportunity Scheme, whereby students have the opportunity to apply for a bursary of up to £1,000 to work collaboratively with academics, which involves undertaking the research and disseminating the findings. It's a reciprocal process, and I do feel that this is something that again is really, really important, that everyone benefits from working together with student engagement initiatives. The idea is to promote some collective leadership from students alongside the development that they may be having with academics in there as well. And so there are clear commonalities shown between how I've used the modules as conceptual frameworks to develop relationships between students and academics in a kind of partnership and very much a collaborative manner. To me, student engagement has been identified as a broader concept in my work. We can see this with the ambiguity about how it's defined, just to start off with. You know, in essence, to most of us, student engagement would mean whereby students work in collaboration with academics to facilitate and provide opportunities for that learning and their involvement as well. It encompasses collaboration, it encompasses active participation by students, but there is a very noted lack of clarity with how it is defined and how it is interpreted, and there's lots that have discussed that in their work. And so we can see that in Kahu's characterisation of conceptual organisers using Leach and Zepler's model. We can also see that with June and Zancaster's work, and also with work that's been developed by Barron and Corbin in their definitional discussions about what does the concept of student engagement mean. I think this would be really good to discuss when we get the opportunity in the conference. But actually, to me, I think what student engagement does is it provides that umbrella. It provides the opportunity to work with the models and the conceptual frameworks of student as producer, student as partners, and it becomes more than a blanket term, but it is there as a way to facilitate some of the developments. To me, student engagement, as I've said there, is multifaceted. I think it's all about embracing student voice. It's all about identifying the valued role that students may have in their learning and teaching. It's about working with those common principles that I've referred to earlier: partnership, collaboration, reciprocal learning, active participation, co-learning, co-producing, co-researching, and by bringing those together in practice, which is where student engagement initiatives come in. So just to kind of bring it all to a bit of a close, as I said, I didn't want to talk to you for too long, but I'm really keen to have some dialogue and conversation with you about how and where we can work with these models or these ideas to develop initiatives. So really for me, what I've shown is, in my practice, I've facilitated and I've led, I've initiated student engagement across the university. I've worked with some of this lack of clarity that we may face with regards to how definitions are employed and interpreted. I've empowered students, and I've shown through examples of my practice and my research that I've applied those roles that students can have with regards to being co-researchers and co-producers in delivering conference papers and writing academic work as well. To me, the engagement of students has been about their role as co-authors in academic publications, as co-presenters, as I've already said, and that to me is really, really important. And I took that opportunity, as I've seen it shown here, to reshape some of the core elements of engagement and participation. My work and my practice over the last 10-15 years has identified the connections between the conceptual models and student engagement as a process, and I've highlighted how I have, as an enabler, empowered students to be more than just passive recipients, but actually to be very, very active in the process of their learning. And this is something that I do feel really, really important about. I just want to end on a final quote by Mike Neary from the Student as Producer publication, which I think will be a good place to start thinking about how we can discuss some of my observations and some of my experiences with yours in the conference presentation. So what Mike said is, do not try to change your institution. Much better to affirm what is special about your institution and celebrate it. And I feel that my work over the last 10-15 years with students, facilitating and working on student engagement, has really done that. It's celebrated the importance of having that collegiate context at the University of Lincoln, which has really enabled student as producer to be developed through research engaged teaching and models and practice. It's really shown how academic partnership can be understood and can be supported institutionally by embedding it across the teaching and learning strategy. Thank you very much for listening. I will finish here, but I very much look forward to talking to you all and having some really good kind of dialogue and conversation in the session that we have for the conference. For what I've got here is just some initial ideas. I will also put these on the stream so you can have a look at them, but I wanted to perhaps think about some of these in the session we have during the conference, how we can reflect on what we can learn from each other and how we can facilitate initiatives and some of these, some of the challenges that we may come across, whether that's on a disciplinary level or on an institutional level, and trying to actually work through those and address how we can really, really expand the levels of student engagement in practice. So thank you very much for listening, and I very much look forward to talking to you in the conference later on. Thanks, bye-bye.